when whippoorwill call, and evening is night, I hurry to my blue heaven.
Hello and welcome to episode number 12 of My Blue Heaven. A bit of an examination of yesterday's JLT game, our final practice game before the season starts against the Tigers next week at the MCG. Game down at Morwell, so the boys are on the road, and in the end a 4-point loss. So yeah, you look at that, you look at the results, a 4-point loss against last year's grand finalists who put together a pretty handy team. 17 players from that grand final team for Collingwood played in the game yesterday. They were still without quite a few of their stars. In particular, Jordan DeGoey didn't play. Jared Stevenson, Will Hoskin-Elliott, Braden Sire was another one, didn't play. Taylor Adams, one of their prime movers in the midfield. And I think the other one was Levi Greenwood. So they were missing quite a few. We went in with pretty much a full-strength team, other than the fact that Matthew Cruiser still hasn't been able to get up for a practice game. We'd probably love to see Callum Marchbank into the team for that round one game, but there's big question marks on him. Looks like he'll be probably playing around about round 2 or 3. And obviously we'd love to get Tom Williamson back into the team at some stage. So yesterday, I reckon, was a full dress rehearsal for pretty much what we're going to see in that opening round against the Tigers. There might be a few changes, but these boys now have played the 3 practice games. We often forget that we did play the Hawks about 10 days ago, and then we had the game against Essendon, and now another game against the Pies. Look, let's just put it in the context. Even though it was a 4-point loss, look, I didn't think the game was played with any great intensity yesterday. Only I think it was 112 tackles all up between both teams, 58 to the Pies and 54 for us. You would like that to increase, and you would suggest in the opener against the Tigers we'll see a lot more tackles in that game. So I didn't think the intensity yesterday was fantastic, although it was a highly skilled game. I thought Collingwood, particularly in that first half, used the ball very well and controlled possession. They had 110 more touches than us throughout the whole game. But I didn't think the game really got into probably third gear until late, when Carlton got a bit of a sniff, and then the Pies really probably wanted to hang on. But look, another really good hit out. A lot of positives to come out of the game, but at the same time, quite a few concerns as well, and still some areas that we desperately need to work on as we approach the season proper. As I mentioned, the Pies dominated uncontested possessions, particularly in the first half with uncontested marks. They were pretty much able to control the tempo of the game, even though I thought we pressed up pretty well and made them switch to the fat side of the ground on quite a few occasions. Had to go back and forward because we were able just to press up into their faces, but they really did. They had big midfield numbers, the likes of Sidebottom and Treloar, Beams, Pendlebury, all won a heap of the pill. But I thought the area, like last week against the Bombers, that were really impressive, were really, I suppose, strong in was clearances. We won that 36-27, which is a really good win against quality opposition. And we broke even in the contested possessions as well, although we didn't have as much as the ball in those 2 areas. I thought we were able to have a significant impact with the likes of our younger brigade once again being able to get their head over the pill at the contest. And if we run through some of those contested possessions, they're all youngsters, and I think that's a really good sign for us. We seem to be building, I've mentioned this in previous episodes, that we're building a really nice mix of young players who are particularly strong on the inside but can do a little bit of damage on the outside. Walsh, 23 disposals, 13 of those contested. Sam Petreski-Seaton, nearly half of his 23 were contested. David Cunningham only had the 14 touches, but 10 of those were contested possessions. And Will Setterfield only the 14 disposals, but 9 of those were contested. So they're very young players, either in their first, second or third season. So I think that's a really, really good sign for us, that similar to what I suppose the GWS Giants were doing in their formative years. They were able to really win the ball on the inside, and then later on, they were able to get a lot more spread in their game, and I think that's an area that we still need to improve on. So with that, the area of concern, and I think it's something we might need to consider. I don't know how we can incorporate it, because if we look at the seconds on the weekend, really the only sort of outside player that we have coming through at the moment who didn't play yesterday at Morwell is Lockie O'Brien. I'd love to probably see him come into the team. We just probably need a little bit more of that balance on the outside. If you look at our uncontested possessions, Mark Murphy, 16 of his 22 were uncontested. Zach Fisher, 15 out of his 20 were uncontested. Ed Curnow, 10 out of his 19 were uncontested. And Kade Simpson, 14 out of 28 of his were uncontested possessions. Now, three of those players, Murphy, Curnow and Kade Simpson, they're all pretty much veterans. Zach Fisher seems to be, at this stage, our only real true outside youngster, and I'd love to see Lockie O'Brien come in and complement that. And we didn't use the ball well on the outside. Murphy's disposal efficiency was poor at 68%. I think Fisher only ran at 60%. Ed Curnow never uses the ball that well. He was around about 65%. I think Kade Simpson was the best, even though he did butcher the ball, particularly in that first half. He ran at around about 70%. So that was pretty much the difference between the two teams. When the game was up for grabs, really, in that first half, and when the true heat of the game was on, was Collingwood's ability to use the ball really well and to spread really well from the stoppages. And that's an area I still think is a big concern for us going into round one against the Tigers. We know how well Richmond are able to move the ball from the outside. So I would love to see a little bit more of a balance. We were excellent in close, but I think, particularly at the MCG, we're going to get absolutely slaughtered unless, we've got players who are able to spread from the stoppage. As much as we were quite resilient and we never gave up, and, we got, I think the margin was out to 21 points in that third quarter, and we came pretty hard in that last quarter, and I think we dominated inside 50s in that last quarter by possibly, I think, doubled Collingwood's inside 50s, and in the end won the inside 50 count for the game. I still find that our ball movement is fairly much stagnant, and we're not seen to be, other than Simo yesterday, we've still not been able to get that run or that free possession from half back. I mean, Jack Crisp for the Pies, he was a perfect example of the Pies just being able to rebound their ball from their back half. We just failed to have someone with that penetration. I think that has to be Nick Newman, but he wasn't used in that way. I think he only had the 10 disposals yesterday. And at times we were just kicking from our half back line. We were just kicking to contests. And sometimes those contests we were outnumbered. I'm not quite sure what we want to do with that, because I know Charlie and Harry McKay and even McGovern are fairly good contested marks at times. It's just not the right way to go. We need to be able to have players moving up the field and creating space and options, but just kicking to outnumbered players. We just gave the ball back to Collingwood on far too many occasions. I'm not quite sure if you guys remember, in the third quarter, Patrick Cripps won a free kick backward of centre. He was confused what to do. He was absolutely confused. He didn't know whether to go sideways. He didn't know whether to go forwards. In the end, he played on and got himself into all sorts of trouble. He may have even been caught holding the ball. He tried to feed out a handball, got it back. It was just a really confusing piece of play. There was no movement up the ground. It didn't seem to be a plan of how we were going to move that ball forward. On credit to Collingwood, they were able to press up into our faces, but we just need to get so much better at our ball movement, particularly from deep in defence. And then when we do try to move the ball quickly, we often, it comes a little bit Benny Hill music with the way we try to move that ball by hand, and we often put our players under pressure with handballs that don't hit targets, or handballing to someone who you shouldn't have handballed to and you should have kicked. So there's obviously an instruction there to move the ball quicker, but the synergy at the moment isn't quite there, and I think that will improve as the year goes on. But it's just an area that for us, we've just found it very difficult to be able to move that ball with any fluency. And when we do, we sometimes, or a lot of the time we turn it back over straight away through just putting blokes under pressure with short handballs, or handballs at the feet, or handballs at the head, or wherever. But putting handballs in a position where someone has got a free run down the ground. Okay, let's start with the forward line. Look, I didn't mind it. It was a little bit frustrating at times, but I sort of liked the setup. I like the three big blokes down there. I don't even mind the fact that Charlie's probably had a lean JLT series, and I'm quite happy with that, because it just means that the pressure's a little bit off him. I think he's going to go into this year with so much expectation and so much hype. The fact that he hasn't set the world on fire, I think, is a good thing that he's going to possibly build into the season. I thought Harry was really good yesterday. He probably could have clunked a few more marks. And look, McGovern didn't do a lot, but I thought he got into the game and he looked a lot more dangerous when he moved up the field as well. I think that's going to take a little bit of time, those three big blokes. I thought our forward pressure wasn't too bad. I think it's a lot better than last year, locking that ball inside forward 50, the likes of Paulson and Gibbons. Preferably you like those two boys to be hitting the scoreboard, but I think their forward pressure is 50% on what it was last year. And we are able to get repeat, I suppose, stoppages and entries inside forward 50. And what I did notice, particularly after halftime yesterday, and I mentioned this in the episode last week, of our ability to lower the eyes going inside forward 50 rather than just blaze away to the top of the goal square to the big blokes who we think are just going to outmark the opposition or bring the ball to the deck. I thought Darcy Moore was outstanding yesterday. He had a day out, and also Roughhead marked a lot of balls going inside their defensive 50, the Pies. Moore, Langdon, and also I mentioned Roughhead as well. So our big boys weren't on yesterday, getting the ball to the deck. But I thought what we did really well, and this must have been a change-up after half-time, was to lower the eyes inside forward 50. And that's where we saw Charlie Curnow start to get off the chain a little bit. Big Harry clunked one out on the lead. Was a really nice mark. I think Cripps got one out on the lead as well. A couple of our little blokes were able to get inside forward 50 and find some space. Gibbons at one stage as well. So that was good. I thought that was a real positive yesterday, that we were prepared to at least look for someone free. And that's all about the forwards being able to create space for each other as well. Well, let's move into the midfield. I talked about winning clearances. I talked about winning the contested possessions. It's just about now having two-way runners, we've got blokes who are really good on the inside and have ability on the outside, but we're just not showing it at the moment. So that ability to spread, and that might come with getting a better tank or some better fitness, and then distributing and using that ball very well is going to be very important. In regards to Phillips in the ruck, I didn't think he was effective yesterday than he was against the Bombers, although he was up against one of the premier ruckmen in the competition in Brodie Grundy. But I actually thought he held his own in the headouts. I think it was 30 headouts to 37, and that probably took into consideration that Harry Mackay, I thought, did particularly well around the ground, Harry Mackay. But I suppose what we don't want a situation to be, particularly late in quarters, I noticed Harry was going into the centre against Brodie Grundy, and we coughed up a couple of goals in red time because of Collingwood's ability. They won out of the centre in the end, the Pies 14-8, and I reckon half a dozen of those were when Harry was up against Brodie Grundy in the ruck in the middle. We just can't afford to do that. Doesn't matter how good that ruckman is. I don't think Harry at this stage should be doing multiple centre square work. But I thought Phillips again was serviceable. Didn't win a lot of the ball around the ground, but had, I think, about 8 1%ers. Led that with Liam Jones, who works really hard in close. And at this stage, he's probably just got his nose in front of Matthew Cruiser. I'm not quite sure where Cruiser's at, but I don't think you can be taking an unfit Matthew Cruiser in round 1, considering now that Phillips has had 2 really good games under his belt at the level. And I think that continuity for Andrew Phillips is going to be really important for us going forward. I don't think we're in any position to be taking him back to the VFL and bringing in an underdone Matthew Cruiser for round 1 against the Tigers. Just quickly, Cripps outstanding again. I'm loving his ability to break away now. He just seems to be able to do that, particularly in the centre. A couple of our younger blokes, I don't know if you guys noticed this as well, a couple of our younger blokes fumbled a lot of double takes. Zach Fisher, Paddy Dow, not so much Patrisky Seaton, but yeah, just Will Setterfield was another one, started off well, but a lot of fumbling and double takes. And once again, that comes with experience, maybe just taking your eye off the ball at the last second, and that's an area that we need to get a little bit better at, because that split second of being able to take the ball cleanly, then feed off, rather than double take, then being tackled. I noticed that happened quite a bit yesterday with some of our younger midfielders. Obviously, that's an area that they need to work on. All right, how do we go defensively? Okay, our back 6. I think the 2 pillars, Jones and Wiedering, have had an outstanding JLT series and also practice match against Hawthorn. I think they've been really, really good. And I'm actually glad, because it was an area of concern last year. Jones had a downer last year, and Wiedering obviously took a long time to get going. So that's a real positive for us, that the big towering defenders, Jones and Wiedering, are in some really good form. Jones was, I mentioned after the practice match against Hawthorn that Jones just needs to refine his game, keep it simple. And he did that yesterday. His body positioning was good. Sometimes he goes to the ground a little bit and is out of the contest, but because he's such a good athlete, he usually recovers pretty well. But I thought he was really good yesterday. And what I'm really liking with and obviously they're talking to him all the time, the assistant coaches, just keep it simple, Liam, with your disposal out of back 50. His first thought now, if he takes a mark, is to turn sideways and look for that person coming around the back. He did it a couple of times yesterday. We fed it off by hand, and we got the ball into the hands of, say, a Simpson or a Newman, or someone just a little bit, maybe a Daisy, just a little bit better by foot. And when he did have to make that decision to go short, it was to someone who was clearly by themselves. So I thought Jones was great. Wiedering just did his job again. Strong in the contest. I can only remember it being outmarked once inside forward 50, and that was against Big Mason Cox. He just couldn't get around him. But I thought for Wiedering, once again, was pretty solid at centre-half back. So the rest of them, mentioned Newman, wasn't a great game, but he didn't do anything wrong. I just want to know who was on Josh Thomas. Josh Thomas, I think the Pies took inside 50. They had something like 17 marks inside 50 to our 10. And 9 of those marks to the Pies came from between Travis Varco, small, Josh Thomas, small, and the other boy, Tom Phillips, snuck down for 3 marks inside forward 50. So who was accountable for Josh Thomas? Far too much space. Who was accountable for Tom Phillips? Far too much space. And who was accountable for Trav Varco? Far too much space. That's going to be a real concern for us. Remember, the Pies yesterday didn't have Stevenson. He would have destroyed us yesterday with his pace and his ability to get by himself. And Will Hoskin-Elliott as well is another one who loves to get the ball over the back. So that we need to fix that up. I didn't think Plowman was great yesterday. Some of his, Lockie Plowman's efforts yesterday I thought were really poor. I know he kicked a nice goal late and took a couple of good grabs, but I thought just some of his efforts around the ball weren't great. Daisy was okay. Simo was great. He kept us in it, but he made a mistake which resulted in a goal to the Pies late. And some of his disposal was ordinary yesterday, Cade Simpson, particularly by foot in that first half. So, and Jarrod Garlett, well, I think the jury is out on Jarrett Garlett. I think he's going to get that opportunity in round one. I'm just hoping that he can show us a little bit more than what he has so far. Although he hasn't been bad. He just, to me, I don't know how safe he is, and I'm not quite sure whether he's fully switched on all the time in that back half. We've got a big game coming up against Richmond, who have such a multi-dimensional forward line with so many options, tall and small, and that really worries me because, yeah, I just feel like our defence at the moment, we're very much reliant on Jones and Wiedering and the veteran Simpson and Daisy, and we're not getting a lot from the others. And I think we desperately need Caleb Marchbank to get fit and back into that team. Look, some of the better players I mentioned, I thought Jones was clearly our best player. Sam Walsh, once again, I didn't mention him in last week's episode. That was deliberate, but I thought it was a really good third game for him now. Outstanding against the Hawks, outstanding last week. I thought he worked really hard again yesterday. 23 touches, 13 of those contested. He plays round one, there's no doubt about that. He's one of our players that can do both, can win it on the inside and is pretty penetrating by foot on the outside. Cripper, mentioned him, a couple of goals from his 23 touches, pretty strong in the contest. Simo across halfback, although he didn't use the ball, I thought he really did keep us in the game with some of his second efforts, and his courage is quite unbelievable for a guy his side. And a special mention to Harry Mackay as well. I thought he, I thought he did really well around the ground, pushed up hard. And although he was beaten in the air a number of times by Jared Ruffhead, I thought he hit back really hard in that last quarter and nearly stole the game for us, kicked 3 goals. And he's just developing really nicely. Let's not get too impatient with the likes of Charlie Curnow and Harry Mackay. They're going to have their down days, but I thought yesterday it was a pretty good afternoon for Harry Mackay. And one last one, I mentioned Charlie Curnow before, but he still had the 15 or 16 disposals yesterday. So he's doing something right. So, yep. They're my best players from yesterday. Okay, onwards and upwards. Yeah, injury-free JLT series. How good's that? Not to get any injuries and going in with pretty much, a full list to pick from, other than a few blokes on the periphery at the moment, Lang and Marchbank and Williamson. But the blokes who are out there all look pretty much ready to go. So it's going to be interesting to see who comes in, if there are any changes. I liked the fact yesterday, even though we would have loved to have seen Liam Stocker get a game, and also Paddy Kerr spent the whole day on the bench, but so be it. We just played the 22 players, and clearly that's a plus for us going forward. We've got the game time over the 3 practice matches we've had into the boys we want to play. It's about who we bring in, and if we do bring anyone in. The big one's obviously Cruz, and the other one I think we must consider is Lockie O'Brien. I just think we might need to have a little bit more run on that MCG on the outside. But very excited, next 10 days or so before round 1 against the Tigers. I'd love to hear your thoughts on who you'd like to come into the team and who you'd like to go out of the team. I know we probably have a few whipping boys, but I think those whipping boys at the moment are putting their hand up to stay in that team for round 1, and let's see how we go. If you like these videos, please give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you again on My Blue Heaven very shortly.